Alright, so this is going to be part 2 where we left off. We finished putting in all the textures on the model, and now we're going to go ahead and kind of take off stuff that we don't need on both Glenn and Cloud, just so we can start posing the character to then weight transfer. So we can start with Cloud first. Let's go ahead and hide all of Glenn, just so we see Cloud, and we're gonna hit Z and go back into our solid mode. To go into edit mode to kind of remove things, because as you can see on the side, Glenn is split up into multiple pieces, but Cloud is just one complete piece that has everything together. So we want to go ahead and remove the stuff that we don't need just for weight transfer. So to go into object or into edit mode, right now we're in object mode, you can go ahead and use this drop down menu up here, or since Blender uses a lot of shortcuts, we can go ahead and use the tab button. And once we're in the tab, in the edit mode, we can go ahead and use face select instead of vertex, just so it's a little bit easier to look at. And then I also like to use the wireframe mode when I'm in edit mode, just so when we select things that are like inside of the body, such as the mouth or the eyes, we can see that a little bit better. So now we can go ahead we can go to our material tab. I'm just going to drop this down just so we can see all the materials that Cloud has, and we're going to go ahead and kind of remove everything we don't need for the base body. So we're gonna remove the mouth by hitting select. If we zoom in and move up, one sec. If we zoom in and we hit select on the mouth, we can see it selected in orange, which is why I zoomed in a little bit. So to create this, or to make this its own object, we can hit P, and that will separate, and we will choose by selection. You can also go ahead and hit A to select everything, and hit P by material, but we are going to need parts of Cloud's, obviously his sandals and his shorts, so it's better to select or separate by selection instead. So we're gonna go ahead and choose his hair next, hit P, selection on that, and we're gonna do the same thing with the rest of kind of the separate parts on his body. So we'll do his eyes, his eyelash, eyebrows, and we'll keep his piercing. We'll keep that as part of his head, but we are going to now use a different form of selecting. Let's say you want to select things a little bit more precisely than just by choosing the entire material. For example, if we choose body A, it will choose like all of his trunks, but let's say we don't want all of his trunks selected. We can hit Z, go back into solid mode, just click off of the model. That will deselect what was selected before, and we will now use L to select. L is selecting by linked, as you can see on the bottom, and you have different forms of selecting. You can choose by seam or by UV. I would say these are the two selections, or the two types of selections that you would mostly use most of the time. We don't really see much of a difference if we tab in through these, but we can if we choose his torso. So I'm just going to deselect again and hit L while hovering over his body. If I choose seam, I can see that it chooses kind of like his upper torso, upper arms. Same if I choose UV. But if I choose his arms, most of the time you'll see a difference. But I guess since this character is pretty optimized, we won't see much of a difference. We will if we separate Glenn, but it will show a difference most of the time. UVs are based off of the UV maps. We'll talk about that later. We won't talk about it now. But let's go ahead and select the parts of Cloud's swim trunks that we need. So I'm going to hit L. I'm going to use the seam selection just because seam most of the time selects more things that are connected than a UV would. And I can choose the inside of his shorts. And now I'm also going to choose his sandals. So I'm going to go back into our wireframe mode. Reason being is that if we want to select part of his sandals while in solid mode, to add to selection you use shift to add. If we zoom in, we can see that it didn't select everything. That's because we're in solid mode and we can't see behind a face that's there. If we go into wireframe, we can see that. See, it didn't select all of his foot. But if we are in wireframe mode and use shift, we will select everything, all the vertices or all the faces. Another thing is that, let's say for some reason we don't want these little dangly bits of his shorts, but let's say you were selecting and you use shift select and you know, added in or selected things that you didn't want to select. To remove things from your selection without restarting again, you can use Control and your select box, and that will basically remove things from selection, versus Shift, which adds things to your selection. I'm just gonna undo this really quick, and I'm gonna go ahead and keep using L to select the rest of his skin. I'm going to keep head separate for now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit P. Or before we do that, in case you wanted to know, do I really have the things that I want selected? While you're still in edit mode, you can hit G and move things apart. We can see that we're kind of missing a pocket right here. So we can just undo and go back to where the model was. And we can reselect these parts. Go ahead and move again. Looks like he's missing some more parts of his pants. Alrighty, that's good enough for me. So we can go ahead and hit P, separate by selection. And that's why I like solid mode, just because each separate object is its own different color. That makes it easier to look at stuff. Let's go ahead and hide the body, and now we can finally select the head as our last object. I guess we can take his piercing with us. So let's go into wireframe mode, shift select, and separate one more time. Can go back into object mode, we'll go back into solid mode, and we can delete this. There's no reason for me to keep this. I know that I'm not going to use it, but if this is your first time working on a model, let's say you're working on a different base model, you might want to keep things. There's no reason to delete everything if you don't need it, especially if you're starting out, but I know that I don't need this. For you, if you're starting out, just keep everything. You can hide it, you can always rename, like extra piece, just so you know what it is, but I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Alright, now that we have each piece of Cloud separated, to make this easier for us, we're going to go ahead and rename every single piece. That way we know what we're looking at. So this is Cloud mouth, Cloud hair, eyes, his head. Okay, that makes it easier for us to know what we're looking at, what we're selecting. So the reason why I separated the head and the neck is because we may need the head for weight transfer. We have a custom head. Where is this head? Here. There's a bunch of different ways we can transfer over weights to a face. This is the way that I do it. You are more than welcome to try multiple different ways. I made a video where I showed how to do it by hand in Blender. Someone said that was stupid, don't do it that way. This way is automatic, so it kind of gets rid of by hand weight painting, which can be a pain in the ass when you're doing face weights. But again, this is my way of doing it. You're more than welcome to do it whichever way you want to, which is why I have the head separated. I want to go ahead and create a duplicate of Cloud's head. And again, to create duplicates in Blender, it's selecting and then Shifty, hitting enter. That way we don't move the head. And we'll call this our transfer head. Okay. So this transfer head is what we're going to be using when we use a different program to transfer over our face weights. We're not going to do that right now. We're going to focus on posing the model first, and then we'll do that later. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the rest of Cloud. We're going to open up Glenn again, and we're going to start separating things that may be together that we don't need, and joining things together maybe they're separated. So obviously this guy has a lot of stuff on. Material preview, we can see everything. We're going to hide certain things that we don't need for the posing process, just to make it easier to look at when we are posing. So we're also going to go ahead and rename certain things that we don't need. If I move this around, I can kind of see what's in this object. These are things I don't necessarily need like to see when I'm posing, so I'm going to go ahead and hide that. But I can see it's missing part of his forearm, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. By selecting this object, I want to tab into edit mode, and using L by seam, I'm going to select his glove. I'm going to hit P by selection. Alrighty. If I go back into object mode, I can see I have two of them. Whenever you create like a duplicate of something, or you separate something from an object, Blender renames it by using .001 and then 234 if you create more than one. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the original one just so I can see what's there. And because this was all from the same object, all the UV maps are named the same. They're called UV0. If for some reason you are mashing together different models and you try to join with a differently named UV map, you're gonna get a big issue when you try to put it in game, which is why I always recommend putting on the textures of a model when you're messing with it in Blender, just in case this happens accidentally. So for example, if this was called UV map instead, and I tried, let's see, what was I selecting? It's called skin UV map, and I try to join it to the forearm, which is called UV0. And to join, you want to shift select and then hit Control J. Oh, I renamed the wrong thing. That's why. If we call the UV map, and we shift select Control J, you're going to see that you kind of lose your shader node or your texture on what you just joined. We're going to undo that, which is why we need our UV maps to be named the same way, which was, what was it again? UV0. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that and rename both of these. So the specific name that you see here doesn't need to be the same, obviously, because it won't allow you, as you can see through these two. It's just the UV map that needs to be named the same. Hold on. Oh. This one also had to be renamed. Okay, there we go. So by having the same named UV map, you avoid that texture issue. Because if you don't know that this was a problem, you're going to get it in Blender, your textures aren't, in Unreal Engine, they're not going to work right, and then you're going to be very confused as to what caused that. Okay. So now that I have his forearms combined, I'm going to go ahead and hide this. Alright, just so I know that that little kind of bracer thing is not necessary. So I'm going to go ahead and tab into edit mode, and I'm going to just remove things that I know I kind of don't need from the body. When posing, I just want the base body to be as bare as possible. For the lower body, we're not really going to be posing much, so don't worry about the lower body. It's mostly about the upper body, especially the arms. That way we kind of have a bare bones Glen that we can use to pose. Okay. So don't worry about renaming these. We'll worry about that later. We kind of just want a basic upper body. That way we can pose it a little bit easier to Cloud. So we can go ahead and open up Cloud again. We'll unhide his head and his body. We're gonna go back into solid mode, and we're gonna unhide Glen's skeleton. Alrighty. When you select the skeleton, most of the time it will put you in the data properties tab. And I like to go into viewport display and just change my display from octahedral to stick. It just makes the bones a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to look at. Alright, so now we're going to be posing. Posing is something that takes a while to figure out. Most of the time you're going to have to go pretty slow on this. I've been doing this enough that I can do it kind of easy, but this does take a while. So we're going to go into pose mode by going into this drop down menu while having the armature selected. We're going to just hit in the viewport just to deselect all the bones, and we're going to drop down this green pose menu. This is so we can see all the bones, and we can sometimes have an easier way of selecting things than by kind of selecting bones randomly and hoping we're choosing the right one. So it's also good to go into this bone tab instead, and that will also show you what bone you're selecting. Obviously we have the model where we need to in terms of scale, so we're not going to touch the scale. We're not going to touch anything except our shoulders / clavicle buttons, bones, and everything that's down from there. So in here, if I go down, I can see the spine. And the way that most models, most rigs are ordered is that you start from your center, which is also called like your root bone, and then you have your spine bone, which includes everything for the upper body, including the head, which is why our legs, we can see, are separated down here. We're not going to move the legs yet. We'll move that last. We'll worry about the upper body first. So we'll keep dropping this down until we see our first arm bone, which is going to be our left shoulder. If we zoom in and move this around and we go into our wireframe mode, we should be able to see the bone that we have selected. If we're in solid mode, that's going to be most of the time inside of the character, so we won't be able to see it. That's why we're going to be using this wireframe mode. And we can go ahead and go back into solid mode now that we know we have that bone selected. And we're going to rotate Glenn's armature around by using R. The R button is rotate. I would suggest always starting out with this like front facing view, just to make sure that you're moving around just one axis first. So using R to rotate, we kind of want to just move it around to where we see Cloud's shoulders going. That looks good to me. And now we're going to keep moving down. I would always suggest to move down by the way that obviously this armature has bones ordered in. That way, like for some reason, if we didn't do it that way and we decided we wanted to pose the hands first, that's going to be a problem, because we can move this here and then we realize, oh, it's in the wrong scale, and we move this instead. You're going to end up doing things kind of backwards and having to do more work than you should. So always start out from the highest hierarchy bone and then move down. Alrighty, so we know that the shoulder bone is kind of where we need to. If we move it around, let's say you're using like a female character, most of the time their shoulders are kind of pulled in a little bit more than a male character, I've noticed. So you might have to also kind of go to this side view and also rotate from here. We don't need to, since it seems like it's doing pretty well. You could always go into wireframe mode, and we can see that obviously Cloud has much more, or has a much higher polygon count than Glenn does, which makes it easier to see who's who. But we can see that it's pretty aligned from this side, so we don't have to mess with it. Let's go back to this front facing view and hit solid mode again. We're going to choose our next bone. We're going to go ahead and move this to where it looks like it's aligned. Rechecking again with that wireframe mode to see if we are in the right spot. Also go have a side view just in case. It's okay if you have like parts of Cloud's mesh kind of sticking out through your mesh. It doesn't need to be a perfect like one-to-one alignment. You're not going to have that because you have a completely different model. And the way that we weight transfer kind of makes up for a model not being perfectly aligned. So it looks like this arm is pretty good. We can move to this elbow or this forearm bone. And for this one, let's again start out with this front facing view. Use R to rotate. Use wireframe mode if you need to. And from this side, I can see that his hands aren't specifically aligned, so I'm going to go ahead and move it on this from this view as well. It's always good to kind of look at it from this side in case you need to kind of do like an inner rotation on the arm. That looks pretty okay. And now we can finally move the hand bone. As we can see, looks like Glenn's hands are a little bit bigger than Cloud's. You can decide to scale from any bone that you want to, really. You can start from the shoulder, which would obviously make everything from the shoulder and down smaller. Again, by using S, we can see that. Or you can just go ahead and scale down the hand bone instead, which is what I'm going to do. Or actually, before I do that, let's see if his elbows are aligned. If I rotate this out, okay, it looks like it. If for some reason his like his forearm or his upper arm was longer than Cloud's and the elbows weren't aligned, then I would decide to scale from here or from the arm bone. But these look to be good, so I'm going to go ahead and scale from his hand bone instead. I'm going to go ahead and scale down just a little bit, and I'm going to keep posing this to where it fits Cloud's hand. Do some rotating from here. Obviously fingers aren't aligned yet. That's going to be the next thing we do. You just kind of want to get the palm to be where Cloud's palm is. Go into wireframe mode. That looks okay to me. Alright. So now we can go ahead and move the rest of his finger bones. So obviously this is bent way more than we would like, so we can go ahead and fix this before we do the other side. So to fix this, let's go back into our object mode. We can hide the root bone and we'll select Glenn's hands. Now we're going to go into sculpt mode, and for this I want to turn on my material preview. And sculpting is a way to kind of move things as well. There's a bunch of different ways you can move things in Blender. You can use edit mode to move by faces, but for stuff like fingers, especially because we're going to get rid of the vertex groups this model uses, we can use sculpt mode to kind of get our fingers to where we want. So I would always use the elastic deform brush if you're just moving things around. We can keep our radius, which is how big this circle is, at 50 and our strength at half. If for some reason you got a perfectly mirrored alignment on the other side, oh, there we go. It's because there's arms. You see that mirrored dot? That way it moves both sides at the same time. But we haven't moved his other side yet, so we're gonna untick this and just focus on moving these fingers just so they're better aligned with Cloud's model. Alright, so just slowly try to zoom in also as much as you can, that way the radius has less to kind of act upon. And Glenn is pretty low poly, which makes this a little bit sometimes more difficult, just because the way this works, the elastic deform brush, is by using the vertex edges. If I go into wireframe mode and I turn off the x-ray, I can see that the way this works is by kind of grabbing onto these vertex edges. Obviously for someone like Cloud, we can see his model right here. It's not going to select on because we're not sculpting his body mesh. I would have way more like vertices to hang on to and move, which sometimes makes this easier. But that's fine. We can keep using Glenn how he is for this. So let's go back into material mode and we can keep moving his fingers along. But we can go ahead and toggle off Cloud just to see what our fingers look like. So like this. And this is also useful in case you have like any clipping on the model. Okay. Honestly, it would be helpful if we had like one more vertex right in the middle, but we don't. That's fine. Alright, so now we finished posing one side of Glenn. So we're gonna go out of sculpt mode, back into object mode, open up, unhide our armature again, and we're gonna go ahead and pose his other side. I'm not gonna show how to do the other side because it's just the same thing. Just if for some reason you scaled like we did with the hand bone, what you want to do is find that hand bone. While in this bone tab, you're going to see your scale right here. Just go ahead and copy that and find your right side hand bone and paste in that same scale. Just that way we try to keep things to the same size as much as possible. Alrighty, so I will be back, or I'm just gonna breeze through this really quick on posing the other side. Alright, so we finished posing his other side. I didn't have to sculpt as much, especially since I know that we're not gonna find a vertex group that I can move right here. I'm gonna leave it as is. So now that we have him all posed, we did the top part of his body, but we need to separate his legs. If we don't separate his legs and we try to pose from here, obviously we can see that his legs aren't aligned with clouds. That's going to be a problem. Also, if we leave legs as is, these two meshes, his pants, are way too close, which means that when we do weight transfer, they're going to kind of merge over. We're going to have, vertex groups from his right leg be on his left leg and vice versa. So we need to kind of spread eagle his legs, not too much, but just enough to avoid having these vertices kind of splash over. So we can go ahead and reselect Glenn's body, and we can find his first leg bone. And again, hit R to just separate a little bit. As we can see, by moving his leg bone, it doesn't move the rest of this, this armature that he has on, which means that we could move his, what is this, like a skirt leg armor base thingy along with it by going back, selecting the left upper leg and this leg base and moving them both together. Looks good. And then we can do the same thing with the other side. Right upper leg, leg armor base, and rotating out. If we hide Cloud's body, we can see that kind of gives us the space that we need. Alright, that looks good. So again, like I mentioned before, Cloud's legs aren't aligned with Glenn's body. So this is the only time that you move Cloud's body in terms of rigging. So we can go ahead and open up Cloud's armature, select it, go into pose mode, and we can find his right upper leg bone, left upper leg, and move it to align with Glenn. There we go. Same thing on the other side. Okay. So now we have officially finished posing the model. Next, we're gonna go ahead and remove all the we're going to apply the pose first, and then we're going to remove all the vertex groups. So in terms of what makes the model move with the armature is this little blue wrench, which is this tab down here. So this is called an armature modifier, as you can see right here. So we want to apply this to the model. If for some reason we decide to exit out, it's going to move the model back to where it is. So we need to make sure we apply it. That way it stays in place where we want it to be. So I have not found a way to apply modifiers to multiple objects at the same time. So unfortunately, you're going to have to go through this and apply the armature by hand for each piece. So for this, I would unhide anything on your custom model that's hidden, except we're going to hide the head. The head is one thing that we're going to use a different program to weight transfer from, so we're going to hide that. Everything else though, go down and apply the armature modifier. So we were talking about vertex groups. Vertex groups are what decide, or it's what helps decide what moves and how much it moves in terms of the armature. Most of the time you have vertex groups named the same as the bone that it moves, but that's not always the case, also depending on what type of model you're working with. So for some reason, to see these in action, we can go to our weight paint tab. We can just change a little some settings here. In the viewport overlays, we want our 0 weights to be active only. That way, if we choose something like his spine bone, we can see what's active. So this is one vertex group, which means that whatever is colored in is what moves with this bone that should be named the same. So we have to get rid of Glenn's original vertex groups before we can add in Cloud's vertex groups. So we're going to go back here and we're going to delete all of his vertex groups, which is under this data tab and vertex groups. Just hit this drop down menu and hit E to delete all. So now that we have that, we basically have this model ready to weight transfer. So we are going to go ahead and kind of split this mesh up a little bit more. That way it's a little bit easier to transfer weights from. So I have this selected. Go ahead and separate by selection. Okay, that way the cape is by itself. Go back into object mode, and now would be a good time to start renaming things correctly. So now that we have him renamed, we can go ahead and start our weight transfer. Alrighty, so stuff for like any like head accessories are pretty easy to rig, simply because they're going to be just attached to our main head bone. So to weight paint, we're going to select Cloud's head first, shift select the earrings, that way it's that lighter color. We're going to go to weight paint, weights, and transfer weights. We're going to have to change some settings down here. If for some reason this is closed, you can just select it. In terms of vertex mapping, we want it to be nearest face interpolated. And instead of active layer, we want it to be by name. That way it kind of transfers over everything from the vanilla head, Cloud's head. Down here, we're going to use remove vertex or remove unused vertex groups. This is a plugin, so I'm going to also leave it in the link below. That way you can use it. We can see that it's attached already to our head. So it's perfect. We didn't have to mess with anything this time. We can hide cloud and we can see. For some reason, if it didn't, like for some reason, if it was missing a couple of vertex groups like this, if we try to parent this to cloud's armature and we move the armature around, this is going to be dragging because we have a vertex group that doesn't have any weight paint on it. So we can add. Alright, something else to know, we'll talk about it more later, but red means that it kind of has like a full kind of like effect on the vertex group versus like a lighter bluish color kind of has like a lesser effect on that bone in that vertex group. Okay, but again, we want this to move with the head, so fully red is perfectly fine for this earring. We can rename this done, just so we know that we're done weight painting that. Alright, so next is the eyes. We could use Glenn's kind of really shitty eye texture, or we can go ahead and use Cloud's own eyes, which is what I would recommend using, because the way that this material is set up in game actually looks really nice. So to do this, we're gonna open up Cloud's eyes, we're gonna select, and we're gonna duplicate it. That way we can take this kind of like for our own for Glenn. So we'll call this Glenn eyes. Alrighty, so to make sure that this works with Glenn's face, all we have to do is just open up his or unhide his own eyes and make sure we're kind of in the right spot. Obviously his eyes are just a little bit bigger, but that's fine. So to move this, we're again just gonna be in object mode and use GZ to move up and down, just to the point where we kind of have his eyes where we want them to be. That looks pretty good to me. And again, we can, if for some reason they're not fitting in Glenn's head, we can move them back, forward, any way we need to. Alrighty. So again, these are going to be the eyes that we use for Glenn. So we can go ahead and hide those. Hide this. Don't delete anything unless you're absolutely certain you don't need it anymore. And we're going to go ahead and weight paint his eyelashes next. So before we do that, we can open up Cloud's eyelashes. And there's a couple of different ways we can do this. We can either keep using Cloud's own model and own mesh. And we can do that by creating a duplicate of this, opening up Glenn's head, and sculpting the duplicate of Cloud's eyelashes to fit Glenn's own eyelashes. So I will show you how to do that. So we can go ahead and select Cloud's eyelashes, Shift D again. We'll call this Glenn lashes. And now we're gonna have to move this a couple of different ways. We're gonna have to move it probably first front and back first. So let's select it, GX. Again, it's not going to be perfect, which is why we're going to sculpt. I like the size of the eyelashes already, so I don't have a need to like scale it down a little bit. So instead we're going to go into our sculpt mode and we're going to start sculpting. We're going to use the Y axis That way we can mirror it. That way we don't have to do this twice. Alright, so now we have Glenn's eyelashes all done. So now we can go ahead and hide that. The one thing I wouldn't recommend just taking from the model or from the vanilla model is eyelashes. Or I'm sorry, eyebrows. This is because eyebrows are like a very distinctive shape. They kind of make a face. So we are going to weight transfer the eyebrows for sure. So for this we can, oh, actually this guy doesn't even have any eyebrow mesh. He's kind of like Aerith. So forget about that. But for some reason, if you had a character with an eyebrow mesh, go ahead and weight paint that like we would anything else. Same thing with the mouth. We're not going to use this mouth. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to open up Cloud's mouth again. We're going to duplicate that. Call it Glen mouth. And we are going to move it to align with the original mouth. Okay. So now we have Glen's lashes, eyes, and mouth all done. That's going to be used when we transfer the character over to a new Cloud armature. But now let's actually do some weight painting. So we can do the hair next. Alright, now that that's done, now we can do kind of like the real, not super tough work, but the real work here. So let's open up Cloud's body, select him, shift select the body again, and transfer weights again. Again, your settings are gonna keep as long as you don't close your Blender app. If you do and you reopen it, you're gonna have to reset these settings again. Let's go ahead and remove unused groups. And we're gonna go into our wireframe mode. Let's go ahead and hide Cloud since we got everything that we needed from him right now. And we are going to go through each of these vertex groups just to make sure that they're in the right spot. And if we do have an issue, we can go ahead and clean it up. Alright, so this is our first finger group. We're gonna kind of zoom in and we're gonna keep tabbing. You can see that this is kind of influencing a part of his bracer. Obviously when you move your thumb, you're not going to be moving the bracer along with it. So let's get rid of the weights here. Because we kind of want to just, if we're adding in weight paint, we kind of just want to assimilate what's around there already instead of, adding in a super heavy weight. Basically for like the top weight, you want it to kind of just overlap on the upper surface of the other fingers. For stuff like B and C, you don't want that touching the other fingers. And there we go. So we finished our first pass through of our weights.